Hi, my name is Greg Mingarelli, and I'm the mayor of the city of Prescott, and your host for Prescott Today. Today we'll be looking at the Prescott water cycle and how we deliver safe and clean water to our citizens. With us will be Craig Dotseth, who is the Public Works Director, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Prescott Today. My guest and expert guide for our Prescott Water Cycle Tour is Craig Dotseth, who is the Public Works Director. Welcome, Craig.
Good morning, Mayor.
Thanks for being with us. Well, tell our viewers a little bit about your role here as the Public Works Director and how long you've been here.
As Public Works Director, we're responsible for all operations and maintenance of the water system, wastewater, streets, solid waste, engineering, and capital improvement programs. So today we're going to talk about water, which is a very important topic to talk about.
How long have you been with the city?
I've been with the city 23 years.
23 years. Awesome. So what are we going to see today? Give us a little bit of an overview.
We're going to kind of what we consider like the water cycle on the water side. We'll go and we'll start in Chino Valley, where historically the city's, at least since about 1947, the city's primary water source has come from Chino Valley wells. We'll come through the system as far as information on pipelines, storage tanks, booster pump stations, and final product.
Sounds exciting. What makes our water system so unique?
The city system is unique for the state as well as many places in the country because of our topography. So we have almost 2,000 feet of elevation differential between the bottom of the system and the top of our system. And kind of rule of thumb, every foot of elevation gives you about half a pound of pressure. So if we're dealing with almost 2,000 feet of elevation, we have almost 1,000 pounds of pressure differential.
Wow.
Within the system.
Right, so our elevation can make that challenging. Sometimes you have too much pressure, sometimes you probably don't have enough. So a lot of different booster pumps and things happening, so it'll be exciting to kind of see how you put all that together.
Correct. As well as the city, it rolls like this. So we have all these, we'll talk about it later, we refer to as zones. So every zone is kind of like a little water system of its own to be able to serve the proper pressure and quality water to our customers.
So we have an important piece of history back here, Craig, from turn of the century. Why don't you describe what this is?
So as we go on today, we'll talk about a little bit about the history of Prescott's water system. And yes, this is a piece of that history. This is actually a plan from 1901 for a pipeline that came from, at that time, they called it Little Chino Springs, which is now labeled as Del Rio Springs. Today, we all know it as. Goes from that spring all the way into the city to what used to be the old South Tank, is what we called it, on the south side of town above Mount Vernon. So there's a piece of history from almost 120 years ago.
So the city really has imported water from its earliest beginnings, even other places other than Little Chino, right? Like down at the Hacienda River.
There's been, over history, it started with wells right on the courthouse square. There were wells along Granite Creek within town. Then it progressed. There has been wells on Potts Creek, Miller Creek, Granite Creek down here by the reservation. There's remnants of an old pump station down there you can see as you go down State Route 89. Then it went on to other aspects of building the Goldwater reservoirs. Goldwater was for city water. There was a water treatment plant up there. And yes, they diverted water from Groom Creek, Wolf Creek, ultimately Hacienda Creek, Banning Creek. All of those were diverted to the Goldwater lakes and actually served water up until 1987.
Okay. Yeah, our city has amazing history and heritage and traditions. And it's interesting as we talk about water, Craig, that there's an amazing history even behind how the city has delivered water since its very beginning. So it's very interesting. Probably a lot more there than we have time to cover today, but very interesting history. We look forward to getting out there and getting this tour started. So let's go ahead and head out and get started. Welcome back to Prescott Today. This is Mayor Greg Mingarelli, and I'm with Craig Dotseth, our Public Works Director. And we're heading out on the tour. We're headed to Chino Valley to look at some of the city facilities that take care of our water supply in Chino Valley. So Craig, we talked a little bit about the complexity of our system, the different elevations that you deal with, and all the zones. How many zones are there, by the way, in our water system?
We have 87 different zones.
87 water zones. That's incredible. And like you said earlier, each one of those zones really kind of operates like its own mini water system. Is that correct?
Yes. And we try to maintain pressures within a zone on the low side of 40 psi and on the high side of 120.
Okay. So that's the range you try to keep those in. 87 zones. I did not realize there were that many. So in addition to that complexity within the city limits, you also have a whole water system out here in Chino Valley that we're going to take a tour of, where you're importing this water from different wells in Chino Valley. How many wells are out here?
In Chino Valley, we have 6 wells. 5 of them are in use at this time.
Okay. So let me change subjects just a little bit here. This time of year, I believe you do a lot of recharge of our aquifer. So let's talk a little bit about what that really means. I don't know that people fully understand how recharge works. And so I'm from the Midwest, so I'm not, recharge I think just naturally happens, right? But here we have a very focused or intentional way of recharging. So tell us a little bit about how the recharge works.
So as you said, yeah, recharge happens everywhere in our world naturally, but then also here in the city of Prescott, we have what we call our recharge facility. So we are supplementing that recharge in order to get water back into the ground, back into the aquifer, so that it continues there long into the future for customers.
So where does that recharge come from?
So the recharge, we, as the city, get water from 2 different locations. Ultimately, we utilize the treated effluent from the wastewater system goes to recharge. And then we also have Willow and Watson Lakes, or the reservoirs as well, that the city purchased in 1998. So then those are surface water recharge rights that the city has. Okay. And yes, we're currently still releasing water from Watson Lake this year. And so that water is released from those reservoirs and goes through a series of pipelines out to the airport area. And we essentially release it in large open basins that are very flat, and it percolates back into the ground then naturally from those basins. But we implement it by taking it to that location and releasing the water.
And you feel like that's pretty effective there, Craig, because isn't that right on the Granite Creek corridor or Granite Creek water system?
Yes, it's immediately adjacent to Granite Creek.
So what percentage of effluent, you talked about the 2 different kinds of recharge, and effluent was the first one you mentioned. So from the water that goes into a home and then the amount recharged, what percentage of that, effluent is recharged?
On an average, from the water that we sell in the water system, we get a return of about 60% of that water that then gets treated.
So all the water that goes to a household, 60% of that water from that household goes to recharge.
Yep, households, commercial business, kind of on a whole on our water system. That's what we see is that 60%.
Which is why in the city we want as many people on our sewer system as possible. We'd like to eventually eliminate as much of the septic systems as possible, because septic systems, I've learned, don't really naturally go to recharge. Much of that's evaporated. Is that right?
Yes. Studies that have been done on septic systems put it as low as only 10% of that water has the potential of getting back into the aquifer on the recharge aspect.
I know in 2017, we put more water back into the aquifer through recharge than what we took out. This year, what are some of those numbers? Are we on track to do that again?
We're on track again for 2019. As of last Tuesday, we were at about 4,451 acre feet of surface water recharged. No, combined effluent and surface water was about 4,451 acre feet. And then the water pumped was about 3,200 acre feet. So
Okay.
we're currently about 1,200 acre feet ahead for the year on recharge.
Yeah, that fluctuates obviously year to year, really based on the kind of winter we have and the kind of snowpack we have in the local mountains. And then I assume monsoon kind of plays into that as well. All the precipitation for that year really kind of dictates how much you recharge from the lakes.
Absolutely, and that's kind of where we're at right now. The Courier just ran an article in the last week on that, and we will be stopping recharge from Watson Lake within the next week because we are getting down to what we consider a conservation pool, and then we will wait and see how monsoons produce and refill the reservoir.
Sounds good. Well, I think that kind of helps people better understand how our recharge works coming from effluent as well as the lakes, and how we're very diligent to try to make sure we get as much of that water back into the aquifer as possible so that we can balance out what we're using. So let's go back to our source of water here, because we're heading out to some wells. We're going to jump out a little bit and tour some of those wells. Where does this water come from specifically? This is the Little Chino Aquifer, is that right?
That's correct.
And the Little Chino Aquifer is an aquifer separate from the Big Chino Aquifer, because we have the Big Chino Water Ranch that's farther north and west from here, but more or less under Chino Valley is the Little Chino Aquifer. Is it somewhere around 2.5 to 3 million acre feet?
That's not a number that I instantly have on top of my head.
I've heard that, Craig, that this aquifer is maybe about 3 million acre feet of water here, which makes it a sustainable 100-year water supply. And then I'm assuming you just have one main line from here going back into Prescott?
We actually have two transmission mains that run from Chino Valley in, a 36-inch and an 18-inch that run all the way from our Chino Valley booster pump station facility that we'll stop at. And they run from there all the way in then to the main zone, which is, kind of the heart of Prescott, and fill tanks there that we'll also stop at.
36-inch water main. It's a pretty good sized water main. Well, our next stop is well number 5 in Chino Valley. So we'll take a little break here and see you back in just a little bit. Welcome back, everybody. We're at Chino Valley well number 5, again with Craig Dotseth, our Public Works Director. So Craig, on this first stop here, we're at an actual wellhead here in Chino Valley. How many different wells does the city have in Chino Valley or other places that we're using?
The city ultimately has 7 wells that we use for our water production, our water source. There's 5 in Chino Valley and 2 in the airport area. The airport area is an area that we started drilling new production wells in the last 10 years in order to supplement our supplies and also capture that water source closer to the city and not have to pump it so far from here. Makes sense.
And these wells in Chino Valley, were they drilled in like the 40s and 50s, more or less?
Yes, they were. The city, over history, as it went from different sources and found that it needed new sources, then the city purchased these wells. And the oldest one we have was drilled in 1947 and purchased 5 wells from about 47 until 62. And those have been the primary source until 10 years ago when we started supplementing.
Okay. How deep is this well, and kind of characterize maybe the other wells in Chino Valley? What kind of depths are we looking at here?
This well is about 800 feet deep, and static water level, where we meet the water in aquifer, is at about 220 feet.
220 feet from here down. So, you know, there's been discussion in the community about the water level changing dramatically during the last 20 some years with the drought. What are you seeing on these wells in Chino Valley? I know you monitor them a lot. What's the static water level do?
We see it change every year. It will drop somewhat during the summer, and then it comes back up in the winter when there's more recharge naturally, as well as our recharge that we do. Comes back up in the winter. But overall, over a long period of time, we've seen it change inches over time, not feet, as some people allude to.
Okay. That's good to know. Now, do you treat water right here at the wellhead, or how does treatment work? Where does that happen?
The city treats its water in two ways. We chlorinate for disinfection all of our water, and then we have one well that has arsenic treatment on it as well. So on the chlorination side, every water source, every well is treated right at that location, and we have that equipment here.
Well, it's quite interesting. I have a lot more questions that I'm going to ask later, but I was intrigued. We're looking at the electric motor that runs this pump, and Craig was telling me this is a 300 horsepower pump, or a motor, I should say.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, you know, when you're talking about going down 300 feet, running a pump down there, it takes a little bit of horsepower to get that done.
Yes.
Well, very interesting. So this is just one of the 5 wells that we have here in Chino Valley. And now I understand we're headed to the Chino Valley pump station.
Correct.
We'll see you over there. Welcome back, everybody. We're at the Chino Valley pump station right now. And Craig, what happens here at the pump station?
So we were previously at the well. All of those wells ultimately send that water here to the tanks that are in our background. And then from that, this pump station sends water all the way into town in the vicinity of Willow Creek Road and Douglas.
So all 5 wells out here in Chino Valley are tied back into this pump station?
Yeah, they all pump to these tanks. That water's all mixed there in the tanks. And then that pump station then in turn sends it on down the road.
So you have 2 large tanks here. What is your storage capacity here?
We have a total of 10 million gallons between the 2 tanks.
Okay. And is there quite a bit of maintenance here? What do your folks have to do to kind of maintain this area here?
We have operators that are on site here 7 days a week operating this, doing general maintenance on the grounds. They're constantly testing the water, morning, noon, and night for chlorine levels. They're monitoring the wells to make sure they're operating at proper conditions, power, flow, everything that way. And then doing, motor maintenance, pump maintenance, things like that on a continual basis.
Yes. So I understand you have 47 acres here at the pump station, and you do have 2 wells on site on this 47 acres.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
What we call well 1 and well 2 are here on this site.
And earlier when we were driving out here, you talked about the 2 transmission lines that go into Prescott. So I assume they really start here at the pump station and head to City of Prescott. That's
correct. And when the water leaves the pump station here in those 2 pipelines, we're running around 400 PSI. Pounds per square inch. So the average homeowner, at our houses, when we're running the garden hose, we're running about 50. Okay. We're leaving here.
400 PSI. Well, that about wraps it up for the Chino Valley pump station. Now we're headed into City of Prescott to the North Tank Storage Facility. So we'll see you there next. All right, we're back driving to City of Prescott, and we've looked at a well site and the pump station here in Chino Valley, and we're headed to a storage facility in Prescott, the North Tank. But on our way, I thought we'd talk a little bit more, Craig, about the 2 wells that we have at the airport. And you've kind of mentioned this earlier, but why? What was the purpose of drilling the wells around the airport area?
Adding those wells in the airport area is kind of a multi-fold accomplishment. One, Arizona Department of Water Resources asked the city a number of years ago to consider adding water production sources in the airport area closer to our recharge facilities, as well as it makes sense for the city as a whole in regards to efficiency. So those wells are, 10 miles closer to the primary use of the city. So then it's that much less pumping that it takes. So the wells are right there immediately adjacent to use around the airport area, so they directly feed that, as well as then come into the rest of the city to supplement the use there as well.
So it's just more efficient, obviously, to be closer to the end user. So those wells, I'm assuming, are still pulling from the Little Chino Aquifer, much like these wells in Chino Valley.
That's correct. The whole basin here from like the airport area and even a little closer to Prescott Valley yet, from there all the way out to between Chino and Paulden is what's kind of the boundaries of the Little Chino Aquifer.
I know later we're going to talk just about water quality and kind of how our water quality has been rated, but specifically to the wells around the airport, what kind of water quality do you have with those specific wells?
Those wells have, it's funny how they can be so different. One of them is very low on arsenic levels. The other one is just above the maximum contaminant level that is set by Arizona Department of Environmental Quality and the EPA. So it's just above that level, so then we have arsenic treatment on that well.
And how do you treat arsenic?
There's several ways that you can treat it. How we are treating it is what's called sorptive media. So there are these very large vessels that are filled with a media that actually attracts and adheres to the arsenic as we pass the water through it, and then it removes it from the water that way.
Do you measure that by parts per million? Is that how you measure arsenic?
Arsenic is actually parts per billion.
Per billion?
Yes.
With a B?
Yes.
And what is that level, like what's the acceptable level of arsenic?
That's 10 is the maximum contaminant level that we have to remain below.
10
parts per billion.
Parts per billion. Wow. Okay. Very interesting. So we're headed to the North Tank storage facility in City of Prescott.
Yes.
So we'll head that way and catch everybody back there in just a little bit. All right, we're back continuing our Prescott water tour, and Craig and I are here at the North Tank storage facility. This is just north of Rosser, right off of Willow Creek Road. And when we pulled up here, Craig, it looked like we were pulling into a couple different bunkers. These are different construction than the steel tanks you have in Chino Valley. These are concrete.
Yes, they are. These are cast-in-place concrete tanks. There's two of them here at this site for 3 million gallons each. And because of the topography at the site and the elevation we needed to meet for the zone, these are partially buried. So they're just, a few feet out of the ground, and lots of concrete here.
Well, before we came back on air, while we were walking around, Craig, you were showing me several different places where we have tanks all over the city. How many tanks do we have in the city?
We have 26 tanks throughout the city.
26 tanks. And so it's kind of a very complex distribution system with 26 tanks, and we have several pump stations as well, I assume?
37
pump stations.
Yeah.
So how does that all work together? Do they all tie together? Give us a little bit of an overview.
Ultimately, everything is connected in one shape or another. So when we just left Chino, the water that was being pumped out of there, coming out of that pump station, it's coming to this site.
Okay.
So this is part of what we call Zone 0, Zone 0 is like the heart then of the main part of town, and from here it goes out like a spider web, and it will go to another zone, a pump station. It'll send it to another tank at a higher elevation. It'll go to another one. Like you said, yeah, easily we can turn around right here and see at least 8 tanks other place in the system. So from here it's going into the distribution system. So we have lines anywhere from, say, 2-inch up to 16-inch that are distributing the water now throughout the neighborhoods. Those lines go out there, they feed the customers' services as well as the fire hydrants. So the fire hydrants feed from this entire system also, and that is kind of what dictates much of our storage size and or the distribution pipeline sizing is to meet fire flow requirements and needs.
So much of the time you're pumping water up to a tank that's elevated so you can take advantage of gravity, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Anything else here at the North Tank Storage Facility that you'd like to tell us?
Yeah, well, it's the city and the tank sites. We have some of the premier property around the city. You know, everywhere we go, whether it's on Indian Hill, so many different places. There's a tank on top of the hill because then we have that gravity benefit to get that down. And then there's that volume of water. So when the power goes off, water's still there.
Right.
Still on.
Good. Yep. All right. Well, that's everything we have here at the North Tank Storage Facility. We're headed to another pump station. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're at pump station number 27. Remember, we have 87 zones here in Prescott. So this is just one of the several pump stations that we have off of Gurley Street and Gail Gardner Way. So Craig, with this pump station, I see the 3 pumps in here and some other equipment. What is the primary function of a pump station?
So the pump station, the last site we were at was the north tanks. That received the water from Chino. So now the north tanks are feeding that zone 0. Now this zone 27 pump station is over here on the edge of zone 0. It's picking that water up and is sending up higher to another elevation, to another zone, in order to continue moving the water up to feed everyone in it.
Yeah, I noticed earlier when one of the pumps was on, it was quite loud. Water was coming in at about 50 PSI, but leaving at about 200 PSI, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So these 75 horse electric motors are pushing that water up into the Hassayampa area. So what are some of the safety features here, Craig? This is a newer facility here at Pump Station 27. What are some safety features?
Some of the things that we've implemented into projects over the years now on the security side is as soon as we opened that door, it notified our people. They know it. It will alarm. We have that on, like the pumps here, we have pressure switches and that on the suction side. If something happens and we don't have water coming to the pump, if that pressure switch will sense that, it won't let the pump run, so we don't burn the pump out and waste money that way. On the other side, if something happens out in the system and a valve gets closed and the water's not going to the tank, then it will sense that. Again, it won't let the pump run. So we've brought many of these features into place to keep from having the potential of blowing up pipes, burning up pumps, things like that, as well as this is set up, like you said, with the 3 pumps. So when we have higher demand, if we have a fire, then the pumps can go from, if one doesn't keep up, it goes, the next one will come on, and the next one will come on. They'll just keep coming in order to supply the water need.
You know, one of the things you touched on that I think is really important for our citizens to know is you really protect this tremendous asset that we have with all the surveillance. Unfortunately, we live in a world where there is terrorism and a water source could be a victim of that kind of activity. And you guys have really done a great job of ensuring that we have surveillance over all these facilities.
Thank you on that. And yes, there's a large effort with many people that making sure that our water supply is safe.
Yeah. In the event that there's a power outage, Craig, and you lose power to these motors and all the equipment that you have, what happens? How do you continue to deliver water?
There's several things that come into play. first off is the majority of our system runs off of that tank gravity type of system. So that's the first thing that happens. Like right now when these pumps aren't running, the tank, the Zone 27 tank, is feeding everybody that's using water. But then also, the majority of our larger pump stations all are equipped with emergency generators on site, and or we have portable emergency generators if they aren't already at a site. So then we can take it to the place where we need it. But like here, if the power goes off, emergency generator starts up, computer tells the pumps to do their thing again, and we're right back off and running.
Yeah, I think people don't really understand all of the intricacies of what goes on behind the scenes when the power goes out. You know, they continue to expect water to come, but there's a lot of moving parts and things that have to happen in the event of a power outage. So it's nice to see the large generator out there, and I saw that in some other facilities to make sure that we continue to have water during those outages.
Yes.
So we're going to head to our last stop. We're going to City Hall, and we're going to look at some of the water conservation efforts the city has put into place and what it looks like on the end user. So we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We're at our last location. We're here at City Hall, and I'm again joined with Craig Dotseth and Leah Hubbard, who is a water resource specialist with the city of Prescott. So I thought here in this last segment, it'd be good to talk about water quality and water conservation. So Craig, you're going to grab a little water here as an end user, right? Yeah. And talk a little bit about water quality, how often we test the water, and how we know we have excellent water.
We are blessed with very high water quality from our wells. As we've talked, we only have to chlorinate, and then we have arsenic treatment at one site. Other than that, the water is very high quality. It meets all state, local, and federal requirements associated with it. Along those lines, customers that are curious, they can go on to the Arizona Department Environmental Quality site and find out about every single parameter that we test for. There are tests that are done on a daily, weekly, monthly, semi-annual, annual, and every 3 years. There's a gamut of thousands of parameters that are tested. Another item is our consumer confidence report that just came out for 2018. Came out earlier this year. That's another document, and it has specific information about our water quality and a little more about the water system. And as the mayor mentioned, yeah, we are here, you know, as a consumer then at our final stop, and we get our beautiful crystal clear water, as well as this water conservation drinking fountain here that fills bottles to help improve, you know, to have less plastic bottles out there in the world.
Well, you know, you mentioned that we do have some new water saving devices here in the city hall, and particularly in the restrooms and some other places here in City Hall. Leah, you want to talk a little bit about what those fixtures look like and then kind of move into water rebates?
Absolutely. We recently updated the City Hall bathrooms with the low water use fixtures that we could get our hands on, the best of the low water use fixtures. So the urinals are actually a high water savings device in which they only flush once every 72 hours. The sinks are automatic on and off, so that stops people from leaving them on and keeping them running overnight. And then also the toilets are dual flush now, so if you lift up, it uses less water than if you push down. We have also, as he said, put this water fountain in here to reduce our plastic bottle water waste. And we recently enacted a new rebate program. So on the 9th, the City Council approved the newest rebate program. And we have started giving rebates for the best low water use fixtures. So if you replace a toilet with a 1.0 gallon per flush or less, you could get $100. We've also increased our incentives. So if you're a septic user, you can get an additional $50 incentive if you replace a toilet. And there's lots of other options on this as well. Turf removal has gone up from 25 cents to 50 cents, and we added washing machines.
Some of that, Leah, really was driven by the recent water study by Gary Woodard in terms of, really being focused on those areas that'll really give us the best bang for our buck, if you will, in terms of conservation, right? Like with the septic system, if you're on a septic system, we're going to incentivize even more to have you use less water because we don't see that come back and recharge.
Correct. We had been looking at the rebate program for a long time. It was time to give it an update, but with Gary Woodard's input, we added some additional things to it that were not originally going to be added to it. So the washing machine rebate of $200, we only rebate for the highest washing machine efficiency. And so you have to check our city website at www.prescottwater.com for that qualifying list. But that was one of Gary Woodard's suggestions. And we also increased that turf removal rebate so that we really push people to not only save on their water bills each month, but also that gives them the incentive to replace it with native or low water use landscaping.
How much money does the city set aside annually for the water rebate program?
We specifically set aside $40,000 in the actual rebate funds and then an additional $10,000 for some of the public outreach events and things that we do each year. And so hopefully we hit out our max this year because we really want water conservation to be accepted and prevalent in the community as it always has been.
Well, I'm very proud of the city and all the efforts that we've made in water conservation. And you and I were talking earlier, it's been actually decades that the city has been having this kind of water conservation program with the rebates. And I think many times people don't really understand the availability of what they could receive when they're upgrading fixtures or appliances or those kinds of things. So it's really important to check that website that you mentioned to make sure that they may be eligible for some rebates.
Absolutely. We also keep printed forms in City Hall. So if anyone needs a printed form because they'd rather mail it in, we accept those as well. And then it gets a one-time rebate onto your utility bill. So sometimes you can save quite a bit of money.
Well, I want to thank both of you. Craig, your team does a tremendous job, and it's been a lot of fun to kind of tour around, at least to get a cursory view of all the different amazing facilities that we have to deliver water in the city. And I've learned a lot today, and hopefully folks have learned as much as I have. Any parting shots for us today?
Well, it's been a great trip, and we always like the opportunity to get information out there to help people have the understanding of what it takes and the many things that the city does do in order to maintain that water service.
Well, you and your team do a great job, so thanks so much for your time. That's all we have for today. You've been watching Prescott Today. This is Mayor Greg Mingorelli, and we'll see you next time.